Well, welcome everybody, and so glad that you decided to spend a part of your Sunday with us. This is our August live chat. We do this live chat, as you know, those of you who are regulars to us know that we do this live chat every third Sunday. When we can't do it on third Sunday, we do it on fourth Sunday, and you know how that goes. So today we're going to be exploring a topic that is really foundational to all painting, and that is the value relationships. It sounds like a boring topic, but believe me, there's nothing boring about it. It can be a very exciting topic for you when you really get your head into it and see how everything works. So while people are still coming in, there are a couple of things I want to show you. One is well, I should say, let me say it like this: just like the chef, any chef would have in their kitchen a measuring cup and a knife, you might say. Those two things would be kind of essential. Every painter should have available while working a value scale and a color wheel, simply for reference. Both of them would act like a measuring cup would, or measuring spoons or whatever would to a chef. Sort of a reference. Way to kind of jar your memory about how things work. So one value scale, it's really a value, it's called a viewfinder, this right here, that's on the market. This one is really, I think, probably more available in more places. It's called a viewfinder, as I told you, than most of them. But I really like this one. I like mine better, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But for the commercial ones, this is the one I prefer. And the reason is, well, you recognize the language when we play the video. But the reason is that, if I can just guide myself, okay, that the values in this row are ones that we would consider on the light, where the light rays are hitting, or on the right side, light side of color, or the color, how color works, light and shadow, light and shadow. And then of course the top layer, or the way I've got it turned here, the top layer would be the values that we can expect to see in shadow. So not in shadow on the bottom, in shadow on top, and then the right across in here, I apologize for my clumsiness here, right across here is the transitional values. Those are the ones that are in between the areas in light and areas in shadow. Now I say that because if you have a value reader of some sort, value scale like this, or a value scale like the one we have on the website, on the DianneMize.com website, free for you, like this, or even another one that I'm especially proud of, but also getting ready to revise, which is also free for you on the DianneMize.com lessons website, is called the value scale, No-Tan value scale, and No-Tan value scale. And what this one does is to break things down value-wise as to what's in shadow and what's not in shadow. And you can punch little holes. Now, of course, when we offer these things digitally for you, we can't offer them with a holes punch. Wish we could, but can't. Technology just hasn't gone that far yet. But you can, if you have a hole puncher, those things are not expensive. Get a hole puncher. You can punch holes right in the center of this one and actually hold it up to anything that you might be trying to discern the value of, and see sort of where it registers along in here. When you look through that little hole, you can see if I look, as I will hold this up to the image behind me, can you see that right in there is that transitional value? That's the middle value range, and you can see as I pull it in, they say, oh no, that's not it, because that's too light. But then if I put it on, see there, right there it is on the spot. So this kind of a tool makes it easy for you to read values you're looking at in nature. You can take something like this out in nature, or if you're doing still life painting, or even if you're doing portrait painting, and you can look through there by holding this up in front of an image. You can look through these little holes there, and you can really discern the value that you're looking at, and will know what to do with it. Now this one has that capability too. It's really a little bit easier to see. You could looking through these little holes that they have. And of course, when you buy one of these, they already have the little viewer portion for you there, so all you have to do is start looking. The one thing I do want to point out about this one, and I'll point out about all value scales, and that is the numbering system. Now, up until about the 2000s, or some maybe well, not many years past the turn of the century, the value scales that we used had the number indicators had the 1 as the 100% light, and they had the 10 as 0 light, or 100% dark. In other words, 10 meant darkest dark, and 1 meant lightest light. That was what I grew up with, and that's the way my head works. Then the industry switched it around. There are lots of reasons. I won't go into the history of it. You won't be. I don't want to bore you with that anyway. You can check it out. They switched that numbering system and started using 1 for the darkest dark and 10 for the lightest light. So those numbers are meaningless, really, unless you know exactly. Well, they really are meaningless if you hear somebody talking about value 10, and you're used to seeing value 10 as being the darkest dark. But if when that person is talking, they're talking about the lightest light, you see how confusing that could be. And in my days of teaching, I'm still teaching, but when I was doing in-person teaching, this one I've used for many years, and it used to have the numbers like I was accustomed to seeing, with the 10 as the darkest and 1 as the lightest, and I would get those in bulk for my students. And then it was around the 2000, 2001, 2 or 3, somewhere in there. I remember because it was just after the turn of the century. The next shipment of these I got in bulk, lo and behold, had the numbers reversed, so that the numbers had value 10 as 1, as lightest light, and value 1 as darkest dark. Well, I just had my students mark those out and put the numbers in right. But this is the way they're numbered these days. I went into all the explanations, say ignore the numbers and simply refer to the values in terms of where they would belong in light and shadow. And the way I like to do that is, if I'm talking about the shadow side, this would be, the number 10 would be the occlusion shadow, which is the shadow that has no light in it. And then as it comes up, this would be deep shadow, right in this area, right in there. Then the moderate shadow would be in this area right in, and then the transition into light right in here. And then halftones, speaking in halftones, or you can simply say that over here would be the low light. That's where the light would be the lowest, and then here would be the moderately low light or moderate light, and this would be the almost the lightest light. I refer to that as halftone 1, and then this would be the center light. That's the brightest white. Now I'm going into all of that because having that kind of language before we play the video, I think might be helpful to you, but also to give you a little bit of scoop on value scales. And just if you have to have numbers to read your value scale, try to get away from that and try to train yourself to recognize the values you're looking at by comparing them. Just compare what does the darkest dark look like, what does the lightest light look like, and then how does this fit in between. And so there's a good, I think perhaps a not bad little introduction to get you going, because then if we can do that, then we can better recognize value relationships. So I spent that first, 5-10 minutes, I don't know how long I was running my mouth there, giving you the scoop on that. So here's how it works, and all of you know this. Members ask questions. That's what our way of being able to keep up with the questions. So the members will ask the questions, And those of you who are not members can join so that you can ask questions too. So we got people checking in, Pat and Cheryl especially. Great. Okay, let's do this now. What we'll do is we're going to play this video. I made you a little, it's about, what was it, 10 minutes? 10, 12 minutes, something like that. Video showing you how value relationships work. And then I bet you'll have some questions. So be sure and jot those questions down while the video is running. And then we will have a discussion afterwards, and I'll try to answer your questions at that time. All right. Are you ready, Roger?
Ready.
Roll that video. A value relationship is the visual distance between two values. The strongest value relationship, the darkest dark, the lightest light, we have all these values in between. That gives those two the greatest visual distance away from each other. The closest value relationship can be any two of these values that are close together in their visual relationship, one slightly darker than the other. The relationship gets stronger the further the values are from each other. And we use also the term intervals. The intervals between values is the visual distance between two values. It's important to be able to see that in order to be able to control the values that we create. To get a better idea of what visual distance is, let's compare the values we see with what we hear in music. Without getting too crazy about that, watch and listen. Without that visual value difference, think about it, we wouldn't be able to see anything. The whole universe would be one single value. Take that one step further with music. Without the audible distance between notes, every sound would be the same tone. We wouldn't have the ability to even hear a melody. This is what our world would look like and sound like. So value relationships are to painting what the melody line is to music. We can see the effects of a very close value relationship in this painting of Irises by Van Gogh. I've taken the color out and put the value scale up so that you can see just how close he's kept those value relationships. We put those colors back in, and we see now the full effect of hue and the saturation of hue within those value areas. Now, if we take our music analogy even further, we can see how the direction of those hues and shapes, their sizes, and their texture can add the full orchestration within this painting. With that in mind, let's explore some of the ways artists use value relationships. Artists have discovered that when they keep their values close, such as Albert Bierstadt has done here, the eyes are able to flow smoothly over an area. Keeping the values relationship close enables the eye to feel that as sort of a transition from one area to another. They have also discovered that when the value relationship is strong, meaning that there are a lot of intervals between the values, we can get a dramatic effect. And we see that here in Bierstadt's painting. where it's very, very light in these areas and very, very dark in these areas. Now, in the very, very dark areas, you'll notice we have shadow. And the very, very light areas, we have not in shadow or in light. As you can see, this scene is backlit, means that the light is coming from the rear, that the shadow areas, the stronger shadow areas, are between us, the viewers, and the light. So that's a wonderful way to create drama, is to use a strong value relationship, but within the shadow areas, keep the values very close so the eye can flow through that area. And we see that over here too. And then we also see that in the area of strong light, where the eye can flow through here, and then the eye bumps here and says, wow. So that's one way that artists use value relationships. Another way artists use close value relationships is to create a quietness, such as we see in this scene by Martin Heed, where you can see how close the darks are to each other. In fact, they're really gradating more than they are contrasting in their relationship. A value relationship can gradate and it can contrast. The main contrast we see here is the moon, which is the brightest light we see in this painting. But most of the painting is done in very, very close values in the shadow areas or the shadow zones, which show a night scene. See some of the contrast here, but still where there's value contrast, we see some of the contrast here, but it's still a very close contrast, meaning a very close value relationship. When we add the color into this one, this is his results. And you can see by the way he's used color and value, that very close value relationship within the close color range, he's created a luminosity. And the luminists would often use that kind of value relationship along with their color relationships to create luminosity. Another way artists use value relationships is to pace the eye or to guide the eye. And usually it's the value contrast, the strength of the contrast, that will play that role. We can see in here in this environment these people are in that the values stay very close. And we see also that the values of the clothing, some of the values of the clothing, the darker part of the clothing, stays within that same close value relationship with the surroundings. It's almost like the surroundings are blending with the eye blends the surroundings with the clothing. You see that all the way through. And we see within the clothing he will use a value contrast that's moderate, we might call it, a value relationship that's moderate. There is a dark, really, really dark here, and a middle value here. This is in that range that gives us a little bit of degree of eye wanting to go there, but not as strong as the eye wants to go here. So it's sort of, this is sort of a primary attention to the eye, and this kind of a closer, I would call it a moderate relationship, value relationship, attracts the eye, you can say, secondarily, primarily in the stronger value contrast and secondarily in the closer value contrast. But the closest value contrast pull the eye around. So you can see how he's used that little method all the way through this painting. What he's doing is pacing our eyes in a horizontal direction. We're guided to move with these people as they move forward. So that's one of the major ways that artists use value relationships, the contrast to attract the eye and the placement of those contrasts in such a way that it guides the eye. Then when the artist adds color to that. Now, the artist is actually doing this with the values of the color. But I'll show you the color subtracted out first so you can really see what the value is doing. And we can see then how color and value unite as kind of a duet to play the same role, or the dual roles that keep the eye moving through the painting and yet have the placement in such a way that the eye stays within the painting. Of all our visual elements, value, color, direction, size, shape, texture, line, value is the only one that doesn't depend upon any of the others in order to communicate visual images. So that's the major reason we pay close attention to the value relationships. How we use those relationships determines what our color does. It determines what our direction does. It determines how we see shape. It determines how we see texture. And it really determines how we see line. It determines how we describe our shapes, and it determines how we compose our shapes to keep the viewer's eye in. And of all the painters in our modern era, Richard Schmid is the ultimate master for using all those things together, but especially using value relationships, as we see here in this still life painting. Let's stop at this point and give you a chance to ask your questions. Well, how about that? Now, did that stimulate any questions from anybody? Have you ever thought about value relationships being related to music? How the tones, the individual tones of music can be absolutely comparable to the individual and separate tones of value. And we could really do that with color too, but I won't. I got a question here. Cheryl asked, would you say that to produce a lively, more energetic painting, we could use stronger value contrast throughout the painting? If so, how to determine when that is too chaotic? That's a really good question, Cheryl. Yes, energetic. The more the value contrast, the more energetic. You can control the chaos by not having it extremely contrasty. So you've got the contrast. Well, you've got that contrast that we can get within intervals of value, say within intervals of about 4 intervals between values. That's a nice little contrast. And so you can work within the intervals that are not too close in creating your values, and then have where you want, of course, when you're working realistically, you're going to have some occlusion areas too, which would be those darkest darks and some lightest lights, but use those for accents and depend on the intervals of values between maybe 3 and 4 intervals, perhaps 2. But anyway, the more intervals there are between 2 values that are side by side, the more energetic it is. Energy, energy, energy. But you can control the chaos, as I said before, by not having too much of the extreme intervals. And also, you'll let your eye and your intuition to guide you on the feeling of it. We use those close intervals for quieting things down. So, and you can see that in the little Sargent piece that we have in the background here, where you can see how it feels so much quieter when you think about how the feeling of the surroundings these girls are in. So you see how this feels so much quieter as far as feeling is concerned than say where the white contrasts with that, and that is about a 3 interval contrast right there between this ground and the image there. And then if you come over here, you can see this part right in here is much quieter than we see the feeling of more busyness or more energeticness that we see there on the corner, and how that energy is directed. Really, if you look at the diagonal there, it's directed towards the inside of the painting. So just by good by intuition, when you get accustomed to looking at paintings in terms of the energetic expression of the paintings, you begin to become what's creating that. When you find paintings that are done by other artists, and where you feel a lot of energetic expression, then, and instead of just looking at it as what it is, or in the case of abstraction, instead of just looking at it as color or marks or whatever, try to look at it in terms of how is the value, well, the color will do this too, by the way, but how are the value relationships being used? How close, when there are changes in values, how close is that relationship? And you'll notice that where the relationships are very close, where you've got either a single interval between two values, or maybe even just one interval between two values, and in some cases just two intervals, you'll see that it's very, very much quieter. The eye just kind of goes right over that, right through that, like it does up here. But then when you see those intervals between the values getting further apart, or could say even distance of the values getting further apart, then you'll begin to feel that more energetic, especially when there are lots of them in there. So did that help, Cheryl? Does that help answer the question? One thing I do whoops, what happened to the chat?
I had to switch.
Okay, now that's one thing I was, one reason why I was pointing out or discussing the value scales with you, or the value readers, value finders like this one, is that you can actually use this as a tool to read those intervals, read the distance. Now, we do have that problem of this is just a diagram. And sometimes you might see values that are even closer, or value relationships even closer to each other than we'll see between the values that we would see on a scale like this. But it's just a guide, and it can help, I think, maybe help you sort of begin to learn how to read when you see two values together, read the relationship. And the question, I think, that is the best one is how much distance, how much visual distance is between those values. Now, I hope you understand that concept of visual distance where value is concerned. Now, we do have the element of color, especially of hue, that works with those values, and that can, in one way, emphasize the you can have the value contrast and the color contrast, and the more contrast you have of value and color, the more energy you've got there. So let's see, she says, thank you, based on that, nocturnes need to be close value. Absolutely, nocturnes need to be close value relationship. Now, I showed you that nocturne in the video, but also if you have scenes that are very high key, such as you might say a beach scene or something that's early in the morning. I mean, later on in the morning. I don't know what I'm talking about here, but anyway, maybe an overcast beach scene or something where you would have it very high key in value, and you have a close relationship. You'll have that calm, that feeling of calmness that is created. So calmness is created by the closer value relationships, no matter in what key, either high key or middle key or low key. And of course the nocturnes are always low key. So, but the more distance there is between the values that are working together, then the more energetic it is, and it can be very energetic when there's lots and lots of that. So I'm repeating myself, but that's what I do. Judy asked, do you always use white to change your value? not necessarily. Looks like it's going to be a froggy day today, if y'all know what I'm talking about. Not necessarily. When we're changing values, we have to change those values when we're raising values. You said white, so you're talking about raising value. When we're raising values of paint, and I'm talking about oil paint and acrylics and gouache, or the other opaque paintings that tend to have the opaque quality, even though some of oil and acrylics, I know I'm trying to parse words here. Anyway, we raise the value according to what it's going to do to the color. Of course, if we were just painting in black and white, yes, we would use white to raise the value. But we raise the value according to what it's going to do to the color. Now, the tendency of when we add white pigment to paint, it cools it. And so if we are trying to have, say if we're working in yellow-green is a good example. Say if we're working in yellow-green and say as the yellow-green as it comes out of the tube, it may be very, very dark and very, very transparent. I'm thinking in terms of the color sap green, especially the one that's made by Rembrandt, not Rembrandt, Daniel Smith. But anyway, now if we add just white to that, it actually cools the yellow. It sort of kills the yellow and the green when you're raising the value. So in that case, using yellow to raise the value, something like the cadmium yellow light or hence the yellow light, using a yellow to raise the value will keep that yellow in there so that it doesn't change that character of yellow green as you're getting lighter. Now that will work only to about middle value. After middle value, then using a combination of yellow plus white, because once you get that yellow added back in, then using white with the yellow to raise the value will work very well. The same, all colors that have yellow in them, like yellow green, especially the ones that have the most yellow, yellow orange, over into orange actually. Well, even the yellow, even the red orange on one side, maybe even blue green, it depends. But when we're raising the value of those, if the color comes out of the tube as middle value out of the tube, to raise the value there, it might be necessary, it will be necessary to add both a light yellow and white. And you have to be careful about the proportion. And you have to work with that to find what proportion of light yellow you have to add to the white so that you can keep that yellow, that saturation of yellow in that color as you're raising the value. Now, I want to point something. I have heard people recommend using those buff whites, buff titanium whites, or even using like Naples yellow. Well, let me warn you about that because those are desaturated. The buff white is a desaturated. It may be warmer, but it's also desaturated. And the Naples yellow is also slightly desaturated. So if you want to raise the value without losing saturation, it's better to stick with a highly saturated yellow plus white to do that. I know I made that explanation very long, but it needed to be long, I think, Judy, in order to explain why you expect that. Now, I will say that when you're raising the value of the blues, especially even with the ultramarine blue, but even cerulean blue, you might not have to add the yellow back in because there's no yellow in blue, you see, to get subtracted out. So you'll find that the colors that live on the cool side of the color wheel will require maybe no yellow, just use white to raise the value, or they may require a little depending on how much yellow they have in them themselves. So that one you'd need to just watch what's happening if you use white to raise the value. If that color that you get, that value of that color ends up being too cool, then it needs a little yellow added back into it. Or sometimes it might need a little red added back to it, like if you're in the violets, for example, on that end. So that's why I always like to emphasize the color wheel, because the color wheel outlines all those colors for us, and we can just refer to the color wheel. Okay, how much yellow does that have in it? Or okay, so if it's like something like a red, and you add the yellow to it and it turns pink, and you didn't want it to turn pink. I mean, add white to it. I'm sorry. You added white to raise its value, it turned pink. You didn't want it to turn pink. Well, all you need to do is add a little bit of yellow back into that, and it should liven it back up and give you the color that you're aiming for. That seems most akin to what you might think of a light yellow rather than just pure old pink. All right, so that was a nice little discussion. Mary Ellen says, so interesting. It is, isn't it, Mary Ellen? You know how I keep saying what color does to color? And then we start putting those relationships together, especially where there's value relationships. There's value relationship in every single color that we use in our paintings. So putting those two together, we have a lot of stuff there we can really make some interesting paintings with, or we can create boring paintings, or we can make chaotic paintings. That's what we need to, that's why it's not a bad idea, I say it that way. Why it's not a bad idea to kind of get into what causes this stuff to work the way it does, so that you get a little bit more, what you say, they say, ability to make it do what you want it to do. You're welcome, Judy. My pleasure. Of course, everybody listening to these chats know that I love to run my mouth, and so having these chats is a good opportunity. All right, so do we were there any other questions that came up? Let's see. Okay, I got that one. One thing I would think would be interesting while I'm waiting for your questions to come in is to look at Richard Schmid's still life painting there. We'll look at it in black and white. Look at it, not in black. It's more than it's black, gray, and white without color. I'll say we'll look at it within color first. But I didn't want to make the video too long, and so I didn't want to repeat myself again. But what I want you to know is, Cheryl, this may be a part of what helps answer your question too. Or you can see what Schmid did here, because I think this is really, really fun. You notice that how close the value relationships are of the fruit. You see all the fruit all the fruit in the bowl, and then you go back up. You see he's got just it's sort of a two interval value difference between this fruit and then this what is that container behind it there. You see how very, very close the values are in all the fruit here, and then if you continue to move around, very, very quiet, very, very non-chaotic, very, very quiet. And then we see, watch how he's taken this value. He's taken this lighter value here, and he has just connected visually. Look at this. He's connected visually the positive area of the bowl with what we'd call the negative area of the fabric, and he's kept that value the same. That value just sort of wraps around here, but look what he's got in the middle, or look what we've got here. We've got a stronger value contrast. You see how this relationship is right here? A stronger value relationship between these fruit and the shadow of the bowl there, as contrasted with where the light is hitting the fabric the strongest. So that we get real emphasis on the stronger, it's grouping, the dark kind of groups itself. Kind of like, remember the Bierstadt, we won't look at it right here, right now, but just recall Bierstadt. See how in the shadow areas of that scene where he kept those values really, really close? And that's sort of what Schmid is doing here. Now, where the values are kept really, really close, even see that white, that's a white bowl there, but it's in shadow. If it's in shadow, he can keep it closer value. See how close that is? And see how close the values are in here? And look how he's grouped those values. He's grouped the darker values, the darker value relationships, all these just about the distance of, or maybe a distance of one value. In some cases, they're the same, or a distance of 1 or 2 or 3, not any more than three intervals between, say, this value and this value. A strong enough relationship to give it emphasis, but not so strong that it makes it feel chaotic. But he's grouped these, and then he's grouped this value relationship right here, just sort of groups itself, and it sort of visually wraps around all of this other. You see, this is very, very light, and we can see very little value change. I get my little director here. Very little value change, just not even an interval, half an interval perhaps, value change between the shadow areas of that fabric and the light areas of that fabric. Now, a lot of people might look at that and think that those values of where the fabric goes in the shadow, they might think those should be a lot darker. But we got to be careful about that, because when we make even if it's there, if we see it darker there, we might need to interpret it lighter so that we can have that relationship that allows the eye to flow right through from the light to the shadow value, shallow, very, very shallow, to the light here. And see how that kind of wraps around there and continues to wrap around, and then we go into this very, very quiet area of the middle value and these very, very close relationships. And you see right back here how it got very, very strong in value relationship, very strong value contrast. We've almost got about a 4, 5, 6, 7 degree intervals, 7 degree. I would think of it as how many intervals there are between the darkest dark and the lightest light there. It's very, very, it's not exactly the lightest light against the darkest dark, but it's very, very close. And you see how active that is, how energetic that is there as compared to this area right in here. So Schmidt understood what he was doing with value. That's when I said he is the ultimate master when it comes to working with color and value of any artist in our era. How easy would it be now, Roger, to how difficult? Can you bring the color version of it? There you are. You're on the ball. Way to go. Now look, we can see now. We see the color, but it's the value of the color that's translating to us. And this feels like more contrast, but it's really not more value contrast. We find that the lighter, the warmer colors, the ones that are in the yellow and the reds, the yellows and oranges and reds, between the middle value and the lighter values, they seem to have more force because they have that warmth, that feeling of warmth. But you can also see how by using the value, keeping those values pretty close to each other, and here enables us also just to feel that contrast of, not really contrast, the relationship, I should say, of the orange to the yellow. Now, I don't want to get into the color theory there, but what I want you to notice is how it is those greens, those yellow greens there in the foliage that are taking on that role of more energy. We're feeling the roundness, and there we go again. There's another characteristic that I don't want to get off topic here, but round shapes are calmer, and shapes that have lots of activity in them or texture, they're more active, more energetic. And you can really see that up here, and he's used the value contrast to reinforce that right up there. So we got very, very much energy up here, got very, very quiet down here. So here's one for you, Cheryl, where he's got very energetic areas. He's used the value contrast and the color contrast, but especially the value contrast to create those energetic areas. Then he's used the roundness of the images and the closeness of the value intervals in order to create that calmer feeling of that the fruit have. And yet we have that activity of red against green and those kinds of things, which I think that's just a lovely little piece. You know, I don't look at it as just something to hang on your dining room, or that's just a furthest thing from my mind. Let's see, what did Cheryl say? So amazing keeping value intervals close. We still have hue and saturation to play with. That's right. And that's exactly what, you can see what Schmidt is doing there. He's playing with that hue and he's keeping the saturation relatively high, but by keeping those value intervals right in there especially, by keeping those value intervals close, he can make that work. And so, still life, especially the oranges and lemons and oranges and yellow apples and things like that, are wonderful to work with for working that warm, all those warm areas by keeping the value relationship very, very close, and yet giving us a dynamic piece to work with there. Very wonderful stuff. I like it when I see something happening with a master's hand, especially when it's working great, and especially when we can look at it, and when we start looking at what's causing it to work the way it does, we can see that makes sense. And people will say, did he mean to do that? You're damn right he meant it. He knew what he was doing. So, okay, any other questions? The concept of value distance, I wondered if you'd given thought to that before, the concept of value distance, a visual distance. Now think about visual distance. I know that the visual language doesn't get enough press, and even the language of music gets a lot more press, and especially from music teachers, than the visual language does. And so I'll get impatient a lot of times when I watch a lot of those teaching videos on YouTube just to see what other folks are doing, and I get so impatient when they sort of assume we're supposed to know stuff, or assume that the student's supposed to know stuff. I think it's so much more exciting when we can know how things work. So the concept of visual distance, meaning that we've got that for the concept of distance, visually we have from the darkest dark to the lightest light, value-wise. And that distance then has in between it a continuum of values that are that we're able to see according. Now here's the other part that doesn't get enough press. We're able to see them because of what's happening in the light. What is the light source doing? That doesn't get enough press. A lot of times the values are presented as just entities within themselves. You must have values this, you must have values that, without acknowledging what the light source is doing to cause us to see those values the way we see them. So one fun exercise that any of you can do, I'm not even going to say excuse me for my frog in my throat anymore, because I'll just be saying excuse me all the way through, and I'm not going to do that. I will take a sip of coffee. Here we go. One thing that you can try, which I think would be really a lot of fun, and especially, our summer is going to be over before we know it, and we're going to be shut up in the winter months again. And winter months are really a great time to do exercise, do fun stuff where we can expand our visual perceptions, where we can expand our visual potential, our possibilities of doing things. So if you get any kind of, still life's a good one, but you can use anything. So if you take just a bowl, and you put in the bowl some red apples, some yellow apples, maybe some lemons, if you put that in, just put that on a surface, and then take just a single light source. You don't need other lights burning in the room, unless they're coming from another room. That's probably not going to do too much, change it too much. But a single light source, say maybe with about a 100-watt bulb, just a single light source, and just place it somewhere. And remember, look at all the different kinds of places you can put it. Either you can place it in front of you where it's showing straight down, shining straight down on the image, or you can put it to the side of you where it's shining at an angle, about 45-degree angle on either side, or you can put it behind the image itself. That's backlight, where you can put it behind the image itself, and then you're going to see, what you're going to see will be the image more in shadow, or you can put it behind yourself, like here, so the light source is, in other words, all those different ways you can put that light source, and you will see a different set of value relationships with every single change you make. And really, it's a fun thing. You can actually with your phone, just take a picture of every one of those, and change your light source, take a picture, take your light source, change your light source. Don't change where you are. You stay in that position, that same position wherever you are. Sit down somewhere. You say the same position, then change the light source, take a picture, change it again. Do that several times, and then compare your pictures and look at how different the value relationships are going to be in the whole set of photos that you've got of the exact same scene. I do want to emphasize here that where you are makes a difference too. So if you stay in the same place, you'll get a truer thing. Now, if you change your position, the scene changes again. And you might try that one where you go then take another step. With this time, you might try just keeping the light source in the same place, and you change your position. Change your position to the right, change your position to the left, change your position so that you're going higher up, change your position so that you're down lower, and just watch how much those value relationships change. And look at it for changing the degrees of value relationship rather than just light and shadow. Or rather than just what people say, do a 3-value study. Well, let's do something that's more fun and more definitive of that, and they give you a lot more possibilities. And that can show you also another thing, and that can show you that you might be able to get a half a dozen paintings from the absolute same image, but all the paintings would be different depending upon the light source. Now, remember Monet? Remember what he did? He would like go to one subject, say the Rouen Cathedral, for example. One subject, put himself in the same position each time, different time of day, different time of year, different season, and he would do a quick painting where he's studying what the value relationship. He didn't use that term because he was looking for color, but in looking and translating or interpreting that color, he was looking for value relationships too, because he had to keep those values close where he saw them close, and he had to be able to perceive them as having some distance from each other where he saw that. So he is one example of, probably the greatest example in our history thus far, of how one scene can be interpreted in some cases 20 or 30 times, and each one be a totally different painting. So you have that potential, and we also see that it wasn't just the Rouen Cathedral. He also did haystacks. He went different places, and he did the River Seine. He did all kinds. I'll give you a good resource where you can find a lot of photographs of Monet's work. Now remember, the lighting is not always perfect on these photographs, but at least gives you an idea of possibilities there. It's called WikiArt, W-I-K-I-R, let me try that again, WikiArt.org, wikiart.org. You can search there for specific artists. You can search for all kinds of categories as far as mostly painting, I think. Visual art is concerned, but you can search like just a single artist, and every work of that artist that is not under the copyright law right now, everyone there, they've been able to find and get references for, is available there, and they have a wonderful file of Monet's work, especially on his water lilies and the haystacks and Rouen Cathedral and several others. So give that, I think that might be worth your time on Sunday afternoon when you kind of don't have anything to do. Just prowl WikiArt and see what you can find there in that. Okay, let's see, Cheryl saying, since the Impressionists were mostly concerned with light and color, if I look back on painters of that period, will I find most use close value relationships? There's a lot of close value relationship, but they do use that. You can, it depends on what kind of light they're dealing with there, Cheryl, but you're going to find a lot of close value relationship, but you're also going to find contrast, like somewhere, when I'm thinking back, especially to him, because he's my favorite. He's the master of impressionism as far as I'm concerned, where he'll show where he'll show the difference in the light and shadow. He'll say where there's really a strong shadow area, maybe kind of similar to what we saw in the Bierstadt painting, where there's a strong shadow area. He'll see the close value relationships and color relationships within those shadow areas, and then he'll also perceive and communicate those close value relationships within the light areas. So, if you go looking for just that, look at what he's doing, the value relationships, especially how he's using the closer value relationships with the colors he's using, and when he's using those, using value contrast there, and look at within those value. A lot of times they'll do it in cast shadows. You look at cast shadow areas and look in the form shadow areas that he will be working in, and you'll see how close he's kept those values, with lots of variations of colors within that. So that would be a good trip for those who have taken. See, Roger has just plugged it in there for you, so that you can have that as a reference and know where to go. And I look at my watch, and it looks like I have talked myself right out of it. So, this has been fun for me. I hope it was fun for you. Really, really fun subject. You don't have to take all this stuff as academic boredom, because it's exciting. It's stimulating to begin to realize what you can do as an artist when you're working with these things, as what they can do to each other. Like when we can know what close value relationships can do with each other. We know when they're a little bit more distant, what they can do. When they're really distant from each other, what they can do, and how we can use our color within that to make those things happen. It is a fun thing to do, and it can be so exciting when you get yourself involved in just using images, like other artists, like Sargent has used his images, like Schmidt has used his images. All the artists in our history, who are the great ones, are using images, just like using value relationships as they are expressing their images, just like we're talking about right here. So, thank you for another inspirational lesson. Thanks, Pat. It was fun for me to do. And thanks to all of you for joining us. We'll hope to look forward to seeing you in September.
Did you get Mary Ellen's question?
Mary Ellen's question, where? No, I didn't. Oh, Diane, is there an abstract expressionist I could study to see these concepts at work? Off the top of my head, you're not gonna believe about, but it would be fun for you to go straight to Jackson Pollock and see what he's doing there. Look at how he was being influenced very much by the relationship, the value relationships, even though they tell us he was just dancing around with his dripping paint, but he was paying attention to what was happening there. Let's see, a lot of the abstract expressionists, some of them were dealing with other concepts too, and they're using a defiance of value relationship. In other words, intentionally making it chaotic. You might look at Kandinsky for that kind of thing, where sometimes you'll see a value relationship that is purposely a lot of strong value contrast arranged in various ways to create that tension, that visual tension. And Marilyn, I'll see what I can come up with other abstract expressionists too. Like right now, my brain won't produce them at the moment, but I'll see if I can come up with others too that I can refer to. But just go check out Pollock's work for just what he's doing there. There's some of the colorists that were doing. Look up that term colorist in the post-abstract expressionism. And see, I'm thinking a number of them. Helen Frankenthaler, check her out. They won't all come to my brain right now because I'm kind of in a rush mode. But start with those, and then next time I believe I may have a coaching session with you tomorrow. Maybe I can have some more names for you then. All right, what do we got here? TJO Jones, thank you for truly valuable art lessons. Reminds me of the old days of art school. Wow, well, my pleasure. And Marilyn, thanks. I'll see you tomorrow, and maybe we can talk more then. I bet we do. Okay, folks, we're getting out of here now. YouTube's going to kick us off if we don't get off. It's after the hour. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in September. So bye-bye for now.